A new report says military doctrines, still framed by historical rifts, are creating new security challenges in the Asia-Pacific. The International Institute for Strategic Studies released its Regional Security Assessment ahead of the Shangri-La Dialogue this weekend. It warns of unfettered risks in defense technology and a worrying proliferation of nuclear capability. A world, it says, that is sleepwalking into instability.
A region no longer fully at peace. From border clashes between Thailand and Cambodia to brief battle between India and Pakistan, Asia-Pacific is witnessing growing threats to security that a new report warns could be here to stay. London-based IISS highlighting in its new publication what it calls principal fault lines running through the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan Strait, and the South China Sea that could lead to conflicts between nuclear-armed powers. All this while major wars are ongoing in Europe and the Middle East that are damaging economies and threatening long-term political stability. The report argues that while security challenges have always been complex, the current pace, scope, and intensity have dramatically increased, and countries are beefing up defenses and strategy to prepare for the real possibility of war. According to the report, military doctrines, formal or informal, hold the key to how armed forces plan their wartime moves. India, for example, focuses its military doctrine on managing challenges posed by neighbors Pakistan and China. While superpowers China and the US have dueling visions of a possible conflict over Taiwan and securing a stronghold on the Asia-Pacific region. While these doctrines can't predict when a war will break out, they can give a sense of how states choose to deter threats and protect what they claim is theirs. They are largely still shaped by geography, as seen in border and maritime disputes. Asia-Pacific is particularly vulnerable to shifting geopolitical tides in the Indian Ocean, especially for energy transits and trade routes. The most telling, recent illustration, Iran's chokehold of the Strait of Hormuz and the US's blockade of the waterway, triggering a global energy crisis. Another risk fueling the flames of war, the rise of artificial intelligence, drone warfare, and quantum technology as countries battle for tech supremacy. And finally, the report warns of a growing threat of nuclear war. China and North Korea's growing arsenals have pushed regional states towards expanding their own nuclear capabilities. The report warns that these developments, if left unchecked, are pushing the world closer to a new nuclear arms race, with the Asia-Pacific at its center.
Now, CNA earlier spoke with Dr. Evan Laxmana, who is a senior fellow at International Institute for Strategic Studies and editor of the Institute's latest report. He elaborates on how countries' military doctrines can shape the way they prepare for conflict.
Military doctrine can almost become a self-fulfilling prophecy because the idea is that you train how you want to fight. And part of how you train is developing scenarios and exercises as real as you can. And when we look at the growing sophistication of how the US conducts military exercises with its partners and allies in the region, when you look at China's military exercises in the Taiwan Strait, then you start to see a growing sense of tension, not just because of the exercises, but because the way that those exercises are done, the assets deployed, the sophistication. If there are accidents or miscalculations, if there are misinterpretations of those exercises, then I think the risk of conflict, grows as well.
He also looked at how Southeast Asia's border disputes and key maritime routes could raise the risk of conflict and whether they could trigger disruption seen in the Middle East.
Across Southeast Asia and the broader Asia-Pacific, there are many unresolved border disputes, both in terms of a land border as well as maritime disputes. So they do become a potential security flashpoint if those issues are unresolved. But they also provide a sense of parameters of how the armed forces of these countries with unresolved disputes plan to fight. How they develop their armed forces on the military side, on the army side, or for the navy side. I think they all are driven by how they envision a future conflict within their geography might take place. And so I think it's particularly challenging to look at the geography of the maritime theater in Southeast Asia, for example, whether it's the Straits of Malacca or the other straits on the Indonesian waters. That creates the kind of opportunities and challenges for the military to maintain the security of the country, but how they intend to develop their forces, what capabilities to buy, what exercises they have to do. These are all tied to how they view the forces of geography in shaping their military thinking.
On the threat of nuclear war, Dr. Laxmana highlighted the worrying trend of growing modernization and reduction in arms control.
When you have, on the one hand, a weakening, if almost decaying state of arms control, you have the growing modernization and number of nuclear weapons between nuclear armed states. And when you add in conventional missile capabilities that are increasingly sophisticated, which in some contexts could be seen as undermining nuclear deterrence, this is where I think you start to see countries responding to each other's force modernization and nuclear development, hence the beginning of an arms race.